Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Planning Advisory Committee meeting for January 17, 2024. I'd like to welcome everyone in attendance today. My name is Joel Watts. I'm the Deputy Clerk for the City of Kawartha Lakes and Recording Secretary for the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. I'd also like to acknowledge and give a special welcome for the very first time the new Director of Development Services, Leah Berry, who is taking that chair for the first time. So welcome, Leah. So according to this committee's terms of reference, at the first meeting of the Planning Advisory Committee for each year, the first order of business is to appoint a chairperson to conduct today's meetings and for the future meetings for 2024. Now, the role of the chairperson includes the responsibility to chair the meeting, to ensure the meeting is conducted as listed on the agenda or by resolution if it is decided to move an item on the agenda, ensuring meetings are conducted in accordance with the Planning Act and the city's procedural bylaw, and calling for pecuniary interest when listed on the agenda, noting that it is up to each individual committee member to determine whether or not they have a pecuniary interest. And finally, to ensure that all members of the committee, visiting staff, and members of the public are treated with respect. So once the chairperson has been appointed, they will conduct the appointment for the vice chair, who will serve as the chairperson in the absence of the chair. So now I will call upon the members of the committee 3 times for nominations for the position of the chair. So firstly, I call upon the members of the committee to put forward a nomination for position of chair. Mayor Elmsley.
I would nominate Andrew Vail.
Member Vail, do you consent to the nomination?
I do.
All right. And I call upon the members of the committee a second time for a nomination for the position of chair. And I call upon the members of the committee a third and final time for a position of chair. Okay, seeing that only one person has been nominated, I declare that Andrew Vail has been appointed as by acclamation as chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. Please come forward and assume your position as chair and conduct the meeting to include the appointment of the vice chair and bring your name tag. Thank you.
Joel, if I may, I was going to second it with some reservations, but seeing you didn't need any seconder, that's fine.
All good, thank you.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And let's move into nominations for the position of vice chair. Firstly, I call upon the members of the committee to put forward a nomination for the position of vice chair. Member Barkwell.
I'd like to nominate Tracy Richardson for vice chair.
Councillor Richardson, do you consent?
I consent.
I call on the members of the committee a second time for a nomination for the position of vice chair. I call on the members of the committee a third time and final time for the position of vice chair. Seeing none, and since we only have one, I declare that Councillor Richardson is appointed by acclamation as Vice Chair of the Planning Advisory Committee. The Vice Chair will assume the role of Chair in the absence of the Chair. Thank you. Congratulations, Councillor Richardson. All right, so let's get right down to business. A motion for the adoption of today's agenda. Member Willock, seconded by Member O'Reilly. All in favor? That carries. Thank you. Any declarations of pecuniary interest with today's agenda? Member Barkwell?
I'd just like to tell you that I do not have pecuniary or an interest in Barkwell Lane. It was a family member, and they never left me in the will.
Thank you for that. Moving into item 3, public meeting reports. Item 3.1 is Plan 2020. I guess I should. Item 3, public meeting. Is required under the Planning Act. A public meeting is being held prior to the committee making a recommendation on these applications. All recommendations that come out of this afternoon will be forwarded to the next regular council meeting on January the 30th. The purpose of this public hearing is to allow the committee to gather information on the applications before us, to hear those wishing to make submissions on applications, and to allow the committee to ask questions of the applicant, interested parties, and staff. Everyone speaking today is requested to state their name for the public record, and in the interest of time, the committee respectfully asks that you keep your comments to no more than 5 minutes. When the appropriate time comes after the planner makes their presentation, members of the public will be provided an opportunity to speak to any public meeting items on the agenda. At that point, please either unmute yourself and turn your video on, or come to the podium and press the speak button to activate the microphone. Starting with item 3.1, Plan 2024-001, application to amend the Town of Lindsay official plan and zoning bylaw 2000-75 at 61 and 75 Logie Street, Lindsay. Matt Alexander, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Thank you. I am attempting to share my screen for the presentation, but I'm unable to at this moment. Sure, that will be fixed in just a second.
Yeah, we're just getting you set up here, Matt.
Great. Oh, here we are. Thank you for your patience. Our first application that we are reviewing is for subject lands identified as 61 and 75 Logie Street, or rather part lot Z west of Logie Street, south of George, with a lengthy legal description. You can see from this diagram that the subject lands are made up of 3 separate parcels. This is an application for official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment to permit 16 semi-detached dwellings and 1 single detached dwelling. The official plan designation is proposed to be changed from future residential to residential. The subject lands are currently zoned future residential as well. There are different new zones proposed for each of the parcels. The zoning for the southernmost parcel at the bottom of the screen is proposed to be amended to residential 1, and that would permit the single detached dwelling with a site-specific exception to reduce the required exterior side yard from 3 meters to 1.25 meters. The zoning of the remaining 2 parcels would be amended to residential 3, and this would permit the proposed semi-detached dwellings. The center parcel would include a site-specific exception to reduce the required exterior yard from 3 meters to 1.25 meters. I'm going to move to the next slide so that you can see the broader context here, just south of Parkside Drive and Durham Street East. The semi-detached dwellings are proposed in 2 clusters. This is the proposed site plan for the northernmost parcel, and this is the site plan for the proposed center parcel. 10 of the semi-detached dwellings are proposed for the middle parcel, accessed by a private drive leading from Logie Street, which you can see the entrance is located here. and the laneway there. 6 semi-detached dwellings are proposed for the northernmost parcel, also accessed by a private drive off of Logie Street, which you can see here. All of the semi-detached dwellings will be 1 story in height with detached garages. They will be located on separately conveyable lots through a future planning application to divide them along the center line of the structure. The proposal generally conforms with the policies of the Lindsay Secondary Plan and City of Kawartha Lakes Official Plan. However, since those are not yet in effect, as it relates to the subject lands, an amendment to the Lindsay Official Plan is required. And I believe we have, and this is the last slide on this, showing the southernmost parcel and the location of the proposed single detached dwelling. The application materials were circulated to the relevant agencies. However, we did not receive detailed comments from all agencies and departments. City of Kawartha Lakes Engineering Services advised that their review would need to be done in the context of the Master Servicing Study and the Transportation Master Plan currently being undertaken by the city. They advised that they would not be able to provide comments until after January 31st. Overall, as mentioned, the proposal generally supports the goals and objectives of the official plan and would contribute to the achievement of the city's housing pledge target of 6,500 new dwellings by 2031. We are, however, recommending that the application be referred back to staff so that all comments can be received and considered. And that concludes the presentation for this application.
Thank you for that, Matt. Members of the committee, any questions of Matt at this time? Member Barkwell?
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much for all the work you've done on all of these. The question that I have for this one is they're coming to committee for official plan amendment and for a zoning bylaw amendment, and all of the outstanding studies that I see here are for traffic design or for EIS or for master servicing or transportation or looking at building design, which I think is beyond what we're being asked for today. You know, if we're being asked for an official plan and a zoning change, then I don't think that all of these other studies, they're more site plan if I understand what's going on. So that's my question is, why can we not approve this, what they're asking for, rather than having to wait for all of these other studies to be reviewed after they've had them in, like the traffic design was May of 2022, and we're still awaiting for that. So I don't know, can we approve that today, do you think?
Through you, Chair. Some of the issues that can arise could impact the number of dwellings that they would be able to build, or the location of the entrance, or certain setbacks and things like that that would be addressed through the zoning bylaw amendment. So currently, the zoning bylaw amendment is, I would say, sort of customized for the proposal, and if any of the comments or review that we receive back requires them to increase a setback or change the entrance of the driveways or something like that that could influence what the setbacks or the separations might be, then that might be something that needs to be adjusted in the zoning bylaw. And so for that reason, we do recommend receiving all of the comments that we can before making a decision. I think you raise a fair point regarding the official plan amendment. That is a fairly broad, general kind of change in designation. However, just as a practice, it's good to sort of handle all of the components that are before you at the same time. And that's the general approach, but I understand where you're coming from there.
Thank you.
Christina?
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to clarify that as of January 11th, the Development Engineering Division, we were able to provide commentary back to WSP, just for the record on this particular file. Thank you.
Member Barkwell?
What does that mean?
Oh, further, Mr. Chair. So there was a commentary that we had provided earlier that we had asked for an extension when we were circulated certain files in this particular neighborhood, and in this situation, we were able to get our commentary out ahead of time, ahead of the January 31st deadline. So those comments are with WSP, and the expectation would be that they would be able to be shared with the proponents when WSP is sharing all those comments. I just wanted to clarify the record that we're not still waiting for January 31st. I recognize they went out subsequent to the report timelines. That was just part of the challenge that we had with trying to gather some information.
Okay, Member O'Reilly?
Maybe to you or to Matt or to Leah, when we reconstructed Logie Street and built Logie Street, is it typical that for something of this magnitude that we need a peer review, or is this just something we do for a traffic study that's kind of typical of most subdivisions?
Sure, through the chair. I don't have the expertise to speak to that myself. However, in conversations with our colleagues in development engineering, I do understand that when there isn't in-house expertise in a particular division's operations, that it is absolutely standard to have items, and in this case, also the traffic impacts study to be peer reviewed. But I will defer to my colleague to either sort of confirm or agree or provide more context.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe that we're looking at a peer review in this particular location. These lands were contemplated under the previous growth management strategy. The number of entrances, et cetera, there's not an entrance for each individual lot. So Logie Street is identified as a collector in this location. Hence, we would work very hard to minimize the number of entrances. And so some of the specific questions or comments are in our commentary that we've provided. As a collector, there is an expectation for road widening, et cetera. But I'm not aware of the planning division having rerouted this through a peer review for this particular proposal at this time.
Any further questions of Matt at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Does the applicant, owner, or their agent wish to speak to the application?
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Tom DeBoer with TD Consulting, representing the owner of the property. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was it's not a very complicated process or a project. It was very straightforward. It's just three of them at the same time, which kind of complicates it a little bit. Christina, thank you very much for providing those comments. I'm sure I'll get those from WSP shortly. As it relates to the commentary with the traffic and the peer review, I know O'Reilly and Barkwell both had noted this. Unfortunately, we did just submit a check to the City of Kawartha Lakes for the peer review, and I'm not quite sure whether that's going to be refunded or not. But as part of the process, WSP did instruct us to provide a peer review for the traffic study. So that being said, hopefully we can clarify that shortly. Other than that, I'm here to answer any questions that would be available to us.
Thanks for that. Committee, any questions at this time? All right, seeing and hearing none. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Going to call a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Committee, Member O'Reilly?
Excuse me, I probably should ask that before, sorry, Mr. Chair. There's no challenges with servicing capacity for this. We're pretty sure that we're okay with servicing capacity. Either Christine, perhaps, would.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. So certainly one of the first comments that we made, and part of the reason we asked for the extension in providing commentary time, is that we are currently under a new growth management strategy review, which includes the transportation master plan, as has been discussed, but also the master servicing study. And we are awaiting the results of the base model of that particular, for this particular area, for Lindsay in general, but we do need to have that information. So it's certainly part of our first section of comments that we're providing back to WSP for the proponent, and that's certainly why there's a delay. I was hoping that we would have that information to be able to meet the timeline of January 31st, but my current understanding is that that particular model, et cetera, has been delayed till at least the end of January. So rather than have the proponent wait for commentary, we thought it more prudent to get out with some of the preliminary commentary that we had on the design that we had reviewed so that they can have an opportunity to see that first. As I indicated before, these lands were contemplated in the previous growth management strategy and given unit counts in terms of those properties. And my understanding to date is that so far what's being proposed is fewer units than had been contemplated in the previous GMS. What we have to ensure is that the overall master servicing study has accommodated the units that were contemplated and or are coming forward now. So that's why we need to see the results of the base model of the servicing study for Lindsay. Hopefully by the end of the month, is my understanding.
Thanks very much for that, Christine. I think it's just great to see these lands finally being developed. You drive by them, they were sitting there for a long time, and if they meet all the requirements, which looks like they have the potential to do, I think it'd be great to get this developed.
Okay, committee, what is your recommendation to council, Member O'Reilly?
I'll let you read it, but I'll move that we move forward with the recommendation.
Okay, so we have a motion that report plan 2024-001, Town of Lindsay official plan amendment and Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw amendment at part of Park Lot Z west of Logie, south of George, 57R-3575, Part 1, Plan 9P, part of lots 13 to 15, and part of Park Lot Q west of Logie, north of George, be received for information, and that the report plan 2024-001, Town of Lindsay official plan amendment and Town of Lindsay zoning bylaw amendment at part of Park Lot Z, west of Logie, south of George, 57R-3575, Part 1, Plan 9P, part of lots 13 to 15, and part of Park Lot Q, west of Logie, north of George, be referred back to staff for processing until review of technical studies has been completed. Is there a seconder for the motion? Mayor Elmsley, any further discussion?
I think it's just going to go to council as long as Ghost of Bill Canoe doesn't appear between now and the end of January.
Calling the question, all in favor? That carries. Thank you. All right, that brings us to item 3.2, Plan 2024-002, an application to amend the Town of Lindsay official plan and zoning bylaw 2000-75 with a draft plan of subdivision at Block 72 on Logie Street. Matt, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application south of the previous application. It's an application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and plan of subdivision to facilitate the development of a 40 townhouse dwelling complex with one single detached dwelling and a new public street. The official plan designation would be changed from institutions and community facilities to residential. The subject lands are currently vacant. The zoning would be changed from community facilities to residential multiple 2 zone with site-specific exceptions for the proposed townhouse dwellings, and residential 2 with site-specific exceptions for the single detached dwelling. The exceptions for the townhouses include a reduced minimum frontage from 12 meters to 6 meters, a reduced minimum rear yard from 7.5 meters to 6.5 meters, an increased maximum lot coverage from 35% to 45%, and an increased maximum building height from 10.5 meters to 12 meters. The single detached dwelling also requires site-specific exceptions. However, the details of that were not provided in the application, and some further discussion with the applicant is required for that to be determined. The proposed development will be organized along a proposed new public road, cul-de-sac, as you can see in this concept plan. draft plan of subdivision. The proposed public road does come off of Logie Street, which is a collector road. The development overall will have a density of approximately 25 dwelling units per gross hectare. The maximum height of the proposed townhouses will be 3 stories or 12 meters, as mentioned. There will be a minimum of 2 parking spaces per unit, consisting of 1 space within a garage and 1 on the driveway. Pedestrian sidewalks and will be provided along the new street extending from the site to Logie Street, and on-street parking would be permitted on the public street. The proposed development conforms with the policies of the Lindsay official plan, which continues to be in effect for this area. The official plan permits medium density residential within the residential designation, provided that the development is consistent with the surrounding development, which in my opinion it is. The development has direct access to a county, arterial, or collector road, and in this case it does, with Logie Street as a collector road. The development can be adequately serviced with sewer, water, and adequate transportation road capacity. As mentioned with the previous application, at the time that the staff report was submitted, we had not received comments from engineering, but we have, I believe, since then received comments, which will be reviewed and incorporated into follow-up. And the other criteria is that the development is to be designed to minimize the visual impact of the development, and in my opinion, it has been. The application was deemed complete and notice circulated to properties within 120 meters. By the deadline for the staff report, we had not received comments from members of the general public. The application was also circulated to relevant commenting agencies and departments, and by the deadline, we had received comments from Enbridge Gas, Alderville First Nation, Fire Services, and the city's Building and Septic Division. And as I mentioned, we did receive comments from engineering as well. None of the agencies that I just mentioned had expressed objection to the application at that time, but we are still awaiting some comments and review of those comments prior to being able to recommend a decision. If approved, this proposal would contribute to the achievement of the city's housing pledge target of 6,500 new dwellings by 2031, and as I mentioned, it generally conforms with the policies of the official plan. However, we are in this case also recommending that the application be referred back to staff so that the comments can be received and reviewed and incorporated into a more detailed recommendation report in the future.
Okay, thanks for that, Matt. Committee, any questions of Matt at this time? Councillor Richardson?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Just a couple quick questions. I know with some of our provincial changes, do you have any concern with the reduced frontage or the increased lot coverage at this time?
In terms of compliance with the zoning bylaw and the official plan, I did not identify any significant concerns with that. I will review, well, in building services didn't identify any concerns with that either, so I would not have any significant concerns with that.
And I assume because we're in the same neighborhood again, the service capacity is based on the plans that we need to update. So I think that question was answered in the previous file. And also maybe just for the general public, we're changing the zoning from community facilities into a residential. What, like in the original plans for that area, I'm sure most people, when you're buying into an area and you see that parcel of land, that you may take into consideration that there will be development in the future. I was just wondering if any of the public comments are towards those changes with the zoning.
Through you, Chair, we did not receive any public comments to date, and I'm not aware of what this property had originally been intended for in terms of community facilities. So I'm not sure if somebody else on staff would be able to provide additional context on that.
So I believe in everybody's folders there was comments back December 11th. We've got comments from some members of the public concerning the property and fencing. WSP, but you guys have that information?
Through you, Chair, I'm not aware of those comments.
Okay, we'll make sure that those comments get forwarded on to you, but there is comments. Okay, committee, any further questions? Member O'Reilly?
Just a quick one. I think maybe the applicant's probably going to speak to it, so maybe he'll address it, but I'm feeling that the comments that were in the letters may be able to address through site plan, but perhaps that's an answer for staff and for the applicant.
Okay, committee, any further questions of Matt? All right, seeing none, does the applicant, owner, or their agent wish to speak to the application?
Good afternoon. My name is Mike Bissett. I'm with Bosefields. I'm the planner with Bosefields for the applicant. And I would say that we're looking forward to working with staff and with Matt to carry on through the process towards an approval, and we're very excited to move forward. In terms of those comments, I did see those today. Joel had sent me those emails. I think I saw 2 emails from Logan Lane. I think it's the same individual on Logan Lane. There was 3 very basic questions as I saw them, comments. One was some of those rear yards along Logan Lane and McGuire only have a chain link fence, and there was some interest in having like a pressure treated wood 8.5 fence separating the development from those existing chain link fences. So I've talked to my client. We're going to obviously speak to staff and think about how we would incorporate that. The other questions were related to stormwater management to ensure, given the interface between the existing homes on Logan Lane and McGuire, that there wouldn't be any sort of stormwater running off onto neighboring properties. Obviously, that's going to be reviewed by WSP and whoever's peer reviewing the engineering or the engineering department, and we'll make sure that that doesn't occur. But that would be, I agree, something that would deal with through site plan, but also I think it's just common practice to have stormwater dealt with on our own site. The third point was there was a question about whether these were 2 or 3 stories. I think it's, just to be clear, there are 3-story townhomes, except for obviously the one detached home, which I believe is only 2 stories. Now the townhomes have been sort of arranged in a way so that you have a flankage condition adjacent to those rear yards, adjacent to McGuire. So you really only have like one townhouse on each of block 3 and 4, as you see on your screen. And there'll be a setback, both a rear yard and side yard setback, sort of buffer towards those streets. But just to be clear, there are 3 stories. And those were the comments that I saw. But again, we'll look forward to working with staff and with Matt as we move forward.
Thank you. Committee, any questions for Mr. Bissett at this time? Deputy Mayor McDonald?
Yeah, there's one other comment also listed on that, was that are these townhouses designated as affordable housing or low income housing? That was one of the questions also.
Thank you for that. That's true. No, they are not. These would be market.
Any further questions? Christina, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. I do just want to clarify that in this particular development proposal, the allocation with respect to community facility has to be compared back to the proposed, I believe it's 41 units, in order to determine 40 units if there is adequate capacity in this particular location. Previous applications, including across the road, had looked at specific allocation in this area and had done some modeling, etc. So as I say, we do need to receive the base model from the most recent master servicing study, but we also have to compare it back to what has already been done. And the proponent needs to take a look at whether or not what they're proposing is in line with the community facility zoning that would have been accounted for previous. So just wanted to provide that clarification for this particular file. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Committee, any further questions at this time? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Calling a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Okay, seeing none. Committee, after hearing the comments, what are your recommendations to council? Member Barkwell?
So I'll move the report to the report plan 2024-002, draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, block 72 Logie Street for concession 6, part of lot 18, block 72, plan 57M-797, be received for information. And that the report plan 2024-002, draft plan of subdivision, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment, block 72 Logie Street for concession 6, part of lot 18, block 72, plan 57M-797, be referred back to staff for processing until review of the technical studies has been completed.
Thank you for that. Seconder for Member Barkwell, Councillor Richardson. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? And that carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 3.3, Plan 2024-003, an application to amend the United Townships of Laxton, Digby, and Longford zoning bylaw 32-83 at 31 Barkwell Lane. Matt, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application for a zoning bylaw amendment to facilitate the creation of a new lot through a future planning application. The subject lands, as you can see, are rural in nature and located at the shoreline. Partial part of the property is designated waterfront, and this portion is proposed to be severed through a future planning application. The zoning bylaw amendment would change the zone from limited service residential to a limited service residential with site-specific exceptions. The exception would reduce the minimum frontage from 25 meters to 19 meters, and that is the frontage that is located on Adair Court to the north of the property, as you can see here. So on this diagram, on this plan, you can see the area outlined in red, which is the portion that is proposed to be severed at a later date, but would also be subject to the limited service residential zoning bylaw amendment. The remainder of the parcel is outlined in green and is a much larger portion of the land here. This portion of the property is designated rural and environmental protection to recognize some significant woodlands and some wetlands on the property. This is proposed to be the retained lot for a future severance application. It's proposed to be rezoned from rural general to open space with site-specific exceptions and a holding provision, and also zoned rural general with an exception with a holding provision. I'm not sure if we have, so we don't have a diagram that shows the exact boundaries of the proposed zoning bylaw amendment changes. However, these green areas, sort of in the center of the property and in this corner of the property, are significant woodlands. Those are proposed to be designated open space with a site-specific exception, and the exception would limit the permitted uses to existing structures, agricultural uses excluding buildings, resource management, passive recreation and small-scale structures for recreational uses, including boardwalks, footbridges, fences, docks, and picnic facilities, and expansion of existing uses. However, this would be paired with a holding provision, which would not permit any new development prior to the submission of a of an environmental impact study demonstrating there would be no impact on the natural heritage features. The portion of the lands outside of that proposed to be zoned rural general exception would include a reduced minimum lot area from 25 hectares, that's the current minimum lot size permitted, to 5.17 hectares, which is what the retained area here is. It would also include a holding provision to prevent any new development until the completion of an environmental impact study demonstrating no negative impacts to the significant woodlands. And on this diagram, the purple area here is identified by the applicant as a potential developable area. However, they don't have, they do not currently have an application to construct anything there. I would also note the waterfront area does contain a newly constructed dwelling, and that is the area that is subject to, or that is proposed to be severed at a later date. Access to the waterfront portion of the lot is currently provided by Barkwell Lane, which is a private lane located on the property. However, as mentioned, it also has frontage onto Adair Court, and therefore an entrance from there may also be possible. However, as you can see, that has not been drawn out or illustrated in the concept. The application was deemed complete. However, it included a stage 1 archaeological assessment, which was submitted with the application. Upon review, it was determined that the archaeological assessment only covered the portion of the property, the waterfront portion of the property. It did not include the remainder of the property. And the archaeological assessment itself recommended that a stage 1 archaeological assessment be undertaken for the remainder of the property as well. The notice of the public meeting was circulated to properties within 500 meters of the subject lands. No comments from the general public were received prior to the deadline for the staff report. The application was also circulated to relevant agencies, departments, and First Nations. The Development Engineering, Buildings and Septic Division, Ministry of Transportation, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, and Enbridge Gas all raised no concerns regarding this application, but of course advised of their standard permitting requirements and other requirements. Chippewas of Rima First Nation and Alderville First Nation raised some concerns regarding the archaeological assessment. And at the time of writing the staff report, we were still awaiting comments from Kawartha Region Conservation Authority on this application. I would also note that the designation, the rural designation of the subject lands, also has a minimum lot size that is similar to the zoning bylaw minimum lot area, and that is something that we would like to discuss with the applicant and determine whether an official plan amendment may be required for this application. And so for that reason, we are recommending that the application be referred back to staff to allow for the outstanding comments to be received, as well as to address concerns related to the archaeological assessment and other details. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Committee, any questions of Matt at this time? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. So I just want to be more specific. The only outstanding is the archaeological review right now on this application?
Through you, Chair. The concern with the archaeological assessment is that the zoning bylaw application applies to the entire property. However, the archaeological assessment only looked at the waterfront portion of the property. And so since the rest of the property is also subject to a Planning Act application, there is a requirement that that it would be subject to archaeological assessment as well. And in order to ensure that the assessment is appropriate, the archaeologist had recommended a stage 1 archaeological assessment for the remainder of the property. And so we would be recommending that the applicant undertake that study as well. If there are, we do want to discuss that with the applicant in more detail. And if there are any mitigating circumstances, then those would need to be addressed. As well, we are still awaiting comments from the Conservation Authority.
Any further questions? Member O'Reilly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the letter from Ecoview, there are two questions they asked in summary. Would it be better to ask them after the applicant has spoken, or would it be appropriate to ask Matt now?
No, ask now. Go ahead.
Oh, anyways, Matt, and I don't know whether you saw in the letter from Ecoview, they had two solutions or some in the rezoning proposal that they recommend. Have you seen them, and do you think, would you like to comment on those two?
I received that email, I believe, this morning, and I have not had a chance to review that in detail, but I may be able to answer the question if you share that.
We'll ask the applicant, and she'll speak to it, I'm sure. Thank you.
Sure. Any further questions of Matt at this time? All right, seeing and hearing none. Does the applicant, owner, or their agent wish to speak to the application?
Hi, everyone. This is Beverly Saunders with Ecoview Consulting. I would like to speak to the application. There are a couple corrections that I would like to make. I think it's a bit of a confusing file just because there's some natural heritage features that are being rezoned. And so I just want to issue a correction to the request. Specifically, since this is up, this will be helpful. There is also a zoning schedule that I included in the letter that was circulated to you all. So that can also help guide you as to what zones are being requested and for what purpose. So to clarify, the portion that is being rezoned along the shoreline is currently zoned rural, but it's designated waterfront. And so the request is for the lands that we are severing, which coincide with the waterfront designation. The request is to zone those limited service residential, as that aligns with the neighboring properties and all the other properties that are zoned waterfront. And so we have that proposed to sever only the area that is designated waterfront, which does not have a size limit in terms of rural sizing. There was a question about official plan amendments in terms of size for rural lots. So as you can see, so the severed lot is about 0.46 hectares. The overall lot is about 5.76. The lot currently does not meet any of the size requirements, and the reduction is solely the area that's contemplated for shoreline development, and in our opinion, the limited service residential zoning. And so our opinion in the planning rationale was that no official plan amendment was required because the only area that's being taken off is the area that was contemplated for limited service residential. The remainder of the lot creates very minimal difference to what the current non-compliance is. And so that is the justification for the reduction in size in the exception zone for the zoning. So that's just to address the official plan amendment. In terms of the retained lot, the proposal is to rezone hydrologic features and their boundaries, wetlands and watercourses primarily, and their 30-meter setbacks to open space. The growth plan, however, has some allowances for what's permitted within the open space zone, and so we have included exceptions subject to additional environmental review within that proposed zone. There's also an area that has been assessed as significant woodland since provincial policy permits development within significant woodland subject to demonstrating no negative impact. We've proposed those areas that are outside of hydrologic features and the vegetative protection zones. We've proposed those be rezoned to rural with a holding provision requiring an environmental impact study should somebody choose to develop within them. So it'd basically demonstrate no impact to that woodland. We have submitted environmental impact study, which demonstrates the purple area on this sketch is good for development, subject to the mitigation measures within the environmental impact study. And so our original proposal was simply to continue those being rural with the recognition of the existing undersized nature of the lot. So there's an exception in there acknowledging the undersized nature of that particular lot. So I just wanted to make those corrections because that was our original proposal. In the letter that I circulated to you, that would be the original proposal, attachment 1, which highlights all of those zones and associated holding provisions. So that's that piece. In terms of the archaeological assessment, we were aware of the lack of archaeological assessment for the retained lot. The proposal was specifically that be addressed via condition of consent. So there are two concurrent conditions of consent, or two concurrent consent applications that have been submitted for both the right-of-way over the existing access and for the severance of the shoreline lot. And so our proposal was that the completion of the archaeological assessment for the retained lot be implemented via a development agreement as a condition of consent. So essentially, when someone chooses to develop the retained lot, they would have to complete the archaeological work and address any archaeological conservation prior to obtaining a building permit. We continue to believe that's an adequate solution to the issue, because as of right now, people don't know where they're going to be developing. And it is obviously pricey to do these archaeological assessments. In the absence of that, however, I have proposed an alternative solution, which is the holding provision also addressing an archaeological assessment. So essentially, the zoning would include, in addition to the requirement for the environmental impact study for portions of the site, that for the entire site, prior to any site alteration, you would have to do an archaeological assessment to clear that holding provision. So I have included that in the alternative option in the letter that I have circulated to the entire team. That's my proposal. And what that would mean is essentially prior to any building permit, you would have to remove the holding provision, which would require the archaeological assessment to be completed. I believe that's justified because there's typically not a scenario where you run into archaeological resources and you can't develop. It just means you might have to do additional archaeological digs in order to remove the archaeological feature if it were found. And so it doesn't preclude development, but more dictates where it can be located or what needs to happen prior to construction. And so that was our solution to that particular piece. Again, we would prefer to do it as a development agreement associated with a building permit to be registered on title. So that would be a condition of consent. But if it must be addressed via this rezoning application, we're happy to include that as a holding provision in the zoning language. And I have provided those alternative solutions because this was submitted quite a long time ago. And the consent applications are not being processed because they're waiting on this rezoning to be approved. And so we would like to keep this moving along if we can. And so that holding provision is our solution to be able to do that if that is something you want to be addressing at this time. And I'm here for any questions you might have.
Thank you for that. Committee, any questions of Ms. Saunders at this time? Member O'Reilly?
I'll just have a quick one. Maybe Matt's listening as well, sort of thing, and I think there was lots of planner talk in there. So as long as Matt understands, that's not a negative comment to Beverly. I don't mean that.
No worries at all.
If the one proposal was to do with the holding, after hearing what Beverly has said and what her two proposals were to move forward, do you have a further comment? Is it too early, or would you make a comment?
Through you, Chair, we will review the submission and discuss those options with the applicant. One of the one of the issues with using a holding symbol for outstanding studies is that if those have an impact on the potential to develop the property, that does not provide an avenue for changing what the zoning is. And so if there is hypothetically, if there happened to be something either through the environmental impact study or the archaeological assessment, which did happen to prevent development on a particular portion of the property that as of yet is not fully understood, that could be placing the future purchaser of the severed property in a very unfortunate circumstance where they are not fully aware of what they might be getting into. And so as a practice, a holding symbol is the sort of thing that you use for meeting conditions that do not have the potential to affect the actual use of the property, but instead are sort of an eventuality, something like having a holding symbol to prevent development until servicing has been extended to a property, something like that. Whereas you could complete an EIS or an archaeological assessment and find out that the whole property is encumbered by something that's as yet not known, which would be a very unfortunate situation. But we will discuss these options and whether there's any other opportunities to move this forward with the applicant as we proceed with this.
Does that answer your question, Member O'Reilly?
Sort of, but that's all right. Maybe Beverly wants to respond if that is appropriate, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I do. Just for clarification, we have done an environmental impact study for the entire property. And so the purple area on your drawing is the developable area, and the mitigation measures for implementation have been included. So there is an adequate building envelope for both a home and a septic system within that developable area. And so the principle of development is not subject to an environmental impact study. The only holding provision for an EIS is related to the natural heritage features themselves that have been identified, in recognition that if they choose to put trails or any of the types of things you're permitted to have in natural heritage features, that you're still obligated to do an EIS for those types of things. So that's the only reason a holding provision for an EIS is included, and it only applies to natural heritage features that have been identified on the site. Okay. So I just want to make sure everybody's clear on that. The principle of development has been established with regards to the submitted environmental impact study. In terms of principle of development for archaeological assessment, that's where we're proposing a holding provision. And I don't disagree with you, Matt. You're absolutely right. You want to make sure that the principle of development has been established. In this particular case, and in general, archaeological assessments rarely to never preclude development. They simply state how much archaeological works needs to be done in order to protect a cultural feature. So, for example, if a stage 2 found an archaeological resource, there would be a requirement to either excavate it or protect it or from the site alteration. So, in this case, it doesn't preclude development. It just means it might be a little more expensive for whomever takes over this property to build a home, right? Because they would be able to excavate those archaeological resources if they were found. And so that's why we're proposing a holding provision, because we don't believe that it precludes the development, the principle of development on the site. And that is also why we proposed it as a condition of consent. But again, I defer to you and to staff and to planning committee and to staff as to whether you're comfortable moving it forward. We of course are happy to work with WSP if it is the direction of planning committee to defer the application. We are hoping to have a decision made today, but recognize that that is entirely up to you guys.
Thank you. Mayor Elmsley?
Just a question about, is there any urgency connected with this severance?
Urgency in the sense of we submitted this in May of 2023. There's a concurrent consent application that has been on hold while waiting for this to be processed. And the landowners are attempting or wanting to sell this in the spring. And any delays are an issue with that timeline. They are deciding whether they want to build in the spring or if they are simply going to sell the property as is. And so, delaying until February or March. Then on top of that, there's timelines for consent applications. And so that eliminates that as a possibility the longer that it takes.
Member O'Reilly?
Just a quick follow-up to Leah, if the recommendation was to go back to staff, to refer back, give you any idea about a time frame that, I realize you've just inherited your new job and all that stuff, but would we be able to get back to like in February or March, or I don't want you to have to make a guarantee that you're not sure of, but yeah.
Thanks for the question. And through the chair, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that a recommendation report come forward following sort of the review between WSP and myself on the comments that were submitted by EcoView, expressed today, articulated by the consultant today. Respectfully, though, there are still some official plan matters that we haven't had an opportunity to discuss with Beverly, and we would like to be able to do that. So I imagine that if there is an OP conformity issue, that would be expressed to this committee as a major, showstopper, preventing your committee making a decision on the zoning. I would like to, of course, have that in front of you sooner than later. So pending the agenda for February, we're setting that up currently. I imagine this can come back. I'll ask Matt to comment on that as well, but I suspect there's room on the agenda to bring this back for February.
Matt?
Through you, Chair, we will discuss this with Director Barry. Looking at the calendar, I believe the deadline for reports for February are due fairly soon. So we'll have to talk about that.
Very safe political answer, Matt. Any further questions? Okay. There's no further questions at this time. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Calling a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Seeing and hearing none. Committee, after considering the comments, what is your recommendation to council? Mayor or Councillor Richardson, I just gave you a raise.
I like that. No, I'm just kidding. Based on, the corrections that were explored just now and, just receiving this report, I think it is prudent that we refer this back to staff.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councillor Richardson, application to amend the United Townships of Laxton, Digby, and Longford zoning bylaw amendment at 31 Barkwell Lane be received for information, and the report plan 2024-003 United Townships of Laxton, Digby, and Longford zoning bylaw amendment at 31 Barkwell Lane, file D06-2023-028 be referred back to staff to address public and agency comments for further review of the technical studies. Seconder for the motion, Member Barkwell. Any discussion? Calling the question, all in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. That brings us to item 3.4 on today's agenda, Plan 2024-004, an application to amend the Town of Lindsay official plan and zoning bylaw 2000-75 with a draft plan of subdivision for 139 Verlam Road South. Matt, go ahead.
Thank you. This is an application for official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision to facilitate the development of the subject lands for 88 townhouse dwellings located on a private common element road. The subject lands are currently designated urban settlements in the City of Kawartha Lakes official plan and future residential in the Lindsay secondary plan. However, the Lindsay official plan is still in effect and designates the lands as future residential as well. You can see the broader context for the application here. The proposed official plan amendment would redesignate the subject lands as residential to permit the development. The current zoning for the property is future residential, and the proposed amendment would rezone the lands as residential multiple 1 with site-specific exceptions and a holding provision. The proposed site-specific exceptions include reduced minimum lot area from 185 square meters to 173.5 square meters, reduced minimum front yard setback from 7.5 meters to 3 meters, reduced minimum rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 3.5 meters, reduced minimum interior side yard setback from 3.5 meters to 1.5 meters, and increased maximum lot coverage from 35% to 40%. The proposed holding provision would prevent any new development until there is confirmation of servicing allocation. The development proposal includes the creation of a 1.2 hectare stormwater management and outdoor amenity area, which is located on the left-hand side of this concept plan, draft plan of subdivision here. The townhouses are located, 88 three-story townhouses are located on the areas identified here, with 23 fronting onto the future Dobson Street extension, located at the top, and the remaining located along the proposed private laneway here. Notice of the application was circulated to properties within 120 meters of the subject land. At the time of the deadline of the staff report, we had not received any comments from the general public. The application was circulated to all relevant commenting agencies and departments. Enbridge Gas, Hydro One, Ministry of Transportation, Kawartha Conservation, and Fire Prevention have all reviewed the application materials and offered no comments or concerns on the proposal. City of Kawartha Lakes Engineering had provided that earlier comment about not being able to comment until after January 31st, but I believe once again they did provide some comments recently. Alderville First Nation expressed some concern regarding the Stage 1 archaeological assessment that was submitted with the application. The assessment had recommended completion of a Stage 2 archaeological assessment. And it's our understanding, perhaps the applicant can clarify, but it's our understanding that the Stage 2 assessment has been initiated. However, it has not been completed due to, basically due to the weather. It will not be able to be completed until later in the year. The proposal is generally consistent with the provincial policy statement and the growth plan and the applicable official plan policies. If approved, the proposal will contribute to the achievement of the city's housing pledge target of 6,500 new dwellings by 2031. However, due to, well, the recent submission of engineering comments, we do require additional time to review those and to speak with the applicant, work with the applicant regarding the Stage 2 archaeological assessment. And so we recommend that the application be referred back to staff for additional review. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Committee, any questions for Matt at this time? Okay, seeing none. Does the applicant, owner, or their agent wish to speak to the application?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, Marshall Smith of KLM Planning Partners. I'm here on behalf of the owner, Laz Developments. And I did submit a presentation. I'm hoping that I can go through that with you quickly here today.
Go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, Mr. Chair, I guess the first thing I'd like to say is hats off to Matt Alexander there for providing so many presentations, one after the other here. I know that's no small feat. It's a lot of information, and thank you all for hearing me out today as well. So again, Marshall Smith of KLM Planning Partners. KLM is the land use planning consultant for the owner, Laz Developments, Inc. On this slide, you can see the location of the subject lands. Matt went through that with some detail, so I won't linger. But what I will say is that on the north side of the subject lands, there's I guess a non-traveled or unmaintained portion of Dobson Street right-of-way that's intended to be extended. This applicant is working with the applicant on the north side of Dobson Street. You can see the collection of properties that's also abutting the existing residential area. KLM Planning represents them as well for applications that I hope you'll hear next month. But those two owners are working collaboratively to also deliver that extension of Dobson Street as part of their work. So these applications now are official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision. The draft plan of subdivision is provided for technical reasons to facilitate creation of a future draft plan of common element condominium that will come after a future site plan application is submitted. So any drawings that I show you today are conceptual and for the purpose of facilitating the zoning bylaw amendment and official plan amendment applications. Next slide, please. Just a little more detail about the area. The development's not an island. There's development surrounding it on all sides, or proposed development surrounding it on all sides, including municipal zoning order applications to the east and to the south. And then, as I mentioned, on the north side of Dobson, we're also representing an applicant for a subdivision in that area. Next slide. Matt went through this with some detail, but what I'll say is that it's in the 2012 official plan as urban settlement boundary. Next slide. The related Town of Lindsay secondary plan, which is currently under appeal as residential. Next slide. And based on that appeal, it's remaining for the time being within the Town of Lindsay official plan as future residential, and that's the purpose of that official plan amendment. Next slide. Again, you can see the site, the surrounding zoning categories that exist on surrounding lands. You can see a little more clearly where that extension of Dobson Street is to the north, and also the additional lands that are working collaboratively to deliver that extension. Next slide. The development concept is a collection of 88 three-story townhouses. They'd be keeping within the height requirements of the RM1 zone category in the zoning bylaw. These dwellings would be about 2,000 square feet each. They would have rear yards of approximately 7.5 meters. Varies depending on where you are within the plan. A portion of the development would have individual driveway access from the south side of Dobson Street, whereas the balance of the development would have individual driveway access from a 7-meter wide private road that you can see kind of makes a backwards J shape to a hammerhead on the east side of the site. Those units on the east side of the site that have frontage on Verulam, or I guess it's kind of the convergence point of Verulam and County Road 36. Those are designed as rear lane or actually dual frontage units. So interior to the site, they would look just like the front yards of the other units within the development. And on the east side, facing County Road 36 or Verulam, it would be treated kind of like a front yard walkout condition there as well. So that's it's more of a pedestrianized urban type of relationship. By virtue of how the hammerhead of that private lane has been designed, and you'll see kind of a central north-south gray line there as well. This development contemplates that, sites to the north and south could develop for similar uses, and that they may want connections through this site as well. And so the geometry, I should say, of these two features has been provided accordingly with that view. If I go over to the west side of the site, it was pointed out that there is a shared amenity space or private parkette that's adjacent to the Trans-Canada Trail. It's about 0.13 hectares in size, and it can be very well programmed with open lawn areas, treat areas, a playground structure, and kind of a minor trail system that links the private and public roads. And it would also complement and have a positive relationship with the roads and the Trans-Canada Trail itself. Next slide. Bit of a better image of that parkette and how it might be programmed in the future. Again, this is private, as the parkette is provided on top of a stormwater management tank that controls the quality and quantity of stormwater for this site independently as it flows out into the future Dobson Street infrastructure. Next slide. To give you a better idea of how these townhouses will look, architectural styling has been drawn upon from the surrounding area, traditional styling per what exists to the north and to the west, projecting from porches and second floor balconies would allow for kind of more of a pedestrian encouraging type of environment, subordinating the vehicular garage. Next slide. I guess it always behooves me to say these things don't get done in a vacuum. A very skilled team of consultants has collaborated on the various disciplines to provide a fulsome submission looking at a variety of aspects from traffic impact studies, environmental assessments, environmental site assessments, groundwater and soil conditions, and beyond. So we're confident that we've given you a comprehensive package of information. We're looking forward to working with the municipality to take these applications through towards a recommendation report. And as it was mentioned there, with respect to the Stage 1 archaeological study, that work has been initiated, I can confirm. And it is a matter of the weather just permitting that related field work to be completed. So we anticipate having some information back to staff in the springtime. Next slide. I do appreciate your time. Thanks for hearing me out. And my contact information is up on the screen if anybody needs to get in touch with me after the presentation. Otherwise, I am here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Committee, any questions? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Thank you very much for the detailed presentation. It's very helpful. Just a couple of quick things. These are market value townhouses?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. These would be market value townhouses. Now, based on the square footage, there may be opportunities for things like secondary or accessory suites to exist within these units, and that could be offered as a floor plan option to future buyers.
Great, thank you. That's good to hear. When we were looking for the stormwater management, we are under the understanding now that it's under the proposed park area with these storage tanks, which is really a unique design. I'm just wondering, because it's still under the urban settlement area, is if staff wanted to comment on service capacity for this area.
Christina.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. Again, this area was contemplated in the previous growth management strategy and through previous development charge studies. However, it was part of an amalgamation of several properties, so the allocation wasn't specific to any one property in this location. So the total number of units needs to be reviewed, and as mentioned earlier, the city is underway with the environmental assessment through the municipal servicing study and the growth management strategy, and all of that will have to be reviewed based on what has been presented. Right now, the allocation in terms of what was provided, in terms of number of units for the amalgamated properties, I believe it was 5 properties in this location, has not been compared back to what the applicant has proposed.
Thank you. Any further questions, Member O'Reilly?
Just a quick one through you, Mr. Ian. Why the condominium element road? Why the condominium element basically? Is it because of entrances and density, or why are you doing it?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that this is in order to achieve greater efficiency of the site in accordance with provincial policy objectives to make efficient use of land. As you may be aware, I guess a local road is a 20-meter wide road. By providing a private common element road, we can achieve the same kinds of access by using a 7-meter wide road. So this is it's a matter of efficiency for the site.
Thank you.
Okay. Any further questions of Mr. Smith at this time? All right. Seeing none. Is there anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Anyone from the public wishing to speak to the application? Calling a third and final time. Anyone from the public wishing to speak to this application? Okay, seeing and hearing none. Committee, you've heard the comments. What is your recommendation for council? Councillor Richardson?
I will move that we refer this report back to staff. It's a long one, so good luck.
Okay, we've got a motion that report plan 2024-004, Town of Lindsay official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for 139 Verlam Road South, file number D01-2023-005, D06-2023-030, D05-2023-009 be received for information, and that the report plan 2024-004 Town of Lindsay official plan amendment, zoning bylaw amendment, and draft plan of subdivision for 139 Verlam Road South, file number D01-2023-005, D06-2023-30, D05-2023-009 be referred back to staff to address public and agency comments and for further review of the technical studies. Is there a seconder for that motion? Member O'Reilly. Any further discussion? Calling the question. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you very much. So at this time, this public meeting held under the Planning Act is now adjourned. That brings us to item 4 on our agenda, deputations, which I believe there are none. Item 5, correspondence, which I believe there are none. Item 6, regular and returned reports, there are none. Final motion of the day, ladies and gentlemen. Mayor Elmsley, seconder, Deputy Mayor McDonald, all in favor? Carries. Thank you. Thank you for your time this afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.